The silent observer. Intelligence Officer Renth of the Nexarian Empire pressed his crystalline viewing apparatus closer to his face, his third eye twitching with barely contained disdain. Through the quantum-enhanced scope, he watched another group of human recruits trudge through their morning exercises at the Sierra Military Complex. His luminescent scales rippled with amusement as they repeated the same movements over and over. "Primitive," he whispered into his neural recorder. Day Cycle 247, the humans continue their inefficient training methods. They waste precious hours performing repetitive physical tasks when neural imprinting would suffice. Their instructor appears to be growing frustrated with their lack of progress. The humans below continued their exercises, unaware of their observer hidden in the cloaked surveillance pod floating high above their facility. Their movements seemed laughably simple to Renth, running in formations, climbing obstacles, practicing with their projectile weapons. How different they were from Nexarian warriors, who emerged from their growth chambers with combat protocols already encoded in their neural matrices. Yet something about their movements caught Renth's attention. He adjusted his viewing apparatus, zooming in on a pair of recruits sparring in hand-to-hand combat. Their techniques were unrefined compared to the perfect neural-enhanced combat sequences of Nexarian warriors, but there was something else. Something unexpected. "Anomaly detected," he noted. "The humans appear to be modifying their techniques during combat. Each engagement produces subtle variations. They are learning from their failures rather than executing perfect sequences." The concept seemed alien to Renth. In Nexarian culture, failure was eliminated through perfect programming. Why would anyone choose to learn through such an inefficient method? He continued his observation, watching as the recruits moved on to weapons training. Again, he noticed the same pattern: small adjustments, learning from mistakes, gradual improvements. His reports to High Command had always emphasized the humans' technological inferiority. Their reliance on physical training rather than neural enhancement, their primitive projectile weapons, their need for verbal communication rather than telepathic links. But now, for the first time in his long career as an intelligence officer, Renth felt a twinge of uncertainty. He shifted his attention to a group practicing with their communication devices. Instead of using the standard protocols he had observed for weeks, they were trying different methods, adapting to various forms of interference. It was as if they expected their communications to be disrupted and were preparing contingencies. "Additional observation required," he recorded. "The humans' training methods, while appearing primitive, may serve a purpose we have not yet understood. Their adaptability could pose unexpected challenges in combat scenarios." As darkness fell over the training facility, Renth prepared to transmit his daily report to High Command. His finger hovering over the transmission button, he hesitated. Should he include his new observations? Would they be dismissed as the paranoid concerns of a field officer who had spent too much time watching primitives? Before he could decide, his sensors detected an anomaly. The energy signature of his cloaked pod fluctuated slightly, something that should have been impossible given an Nexarian technology superiority. He quickly ran a diagnostic, but everything appeared normal. "Security protocols at optimal levels," he muttered to himself. "No detection possible by human technology." Then he saw it, a slight shimmer in the air near his pod, barely visible even to his enhanced vision. His third eye widened in shock as he realized the humans hadn't been practicing random communication protocols. They had been systematically testing for weaknesses in cloaking technology. The last thing Renth saw before his pod systems went dark was a group of human figures in advanced stealth suits, their movements nothing like the clumsy recruits he had been watching. They moved with precision and purpose, executing maneuvers that seemed specifically designed to counter Nexarian advantages. As his emergency beacon activated, Renth managed one final transmission: "High Command, we have gravely underestimated the humans. Their training is not primitive, it is purposeful. They are not practicing war. They are perfecting it." The humans had done the impossible, they had turned their perceived weakness into their greatest strength. While the Nexarians had relied on their superior technology and neural programming, the humans had been learning, adapting, and preparing for this exact moment. As consciousness faded, Rentha's last thought was of the sparring recruits he had watched earlier. He finally understood, they weren't failing to execute perfect sequences. They were learning how to deal with imperfection, how to adapt to the unexpected. And in doing so, they had achieved something his species had long forgotten, the ability to evolve. Adaptable prey. Fleet Commander Silith stood before the holographic war table aboard the Nexarian command ship Eternal Dawn, her iridescent scales shifting through shades of deep purple as she processed the latest battle reports. The massive display showed the positions of her forces surrounding Earth's orbital defense network, a supposedly primitive system that should have fallen within hours of their first assault. That had been 3 days ago. "Explain to me," she hissed to her tactical officer, Krell, "how these humans continue to resist our superior forces." Her bioluminescent patches pulsed with barely contained fury. Krell's secondary appendages twitched nervously as he manipulated the holographic display. "The humans are not fighting according to any known tactical protocols, Commander. They appear to be improvising." The word itself seemed to cause physical discomfort among the bridge crew. Improvisation was antithetical to Nexarian military doctrine, which relied on perfect execution of pre-programmed combat sequences. "Show me," Silith commanded. The hologram shifted to display footage from their latest engagement. A squadron of Nexarian warships, arranged in their standard diamond attack formation, approached one of Earth's orbital platforms. Their energy weapons charged, ready to deliver the killing blow to the seemingly defenseless station. Then everything went wrong. Instead of attempting to defend with their inferior energy shields, the humans had launched what appeared to be chunks of raw metal, thousands of them, varying in size from pebbles to boulders. The debris field wreaked havoc with the Nexarian formation, forcing ships to break their perfect patterns to avoid collision. "Primitive kinetic weapons," Krell explained. "But they've somehow calculated the exact vectors needed to disrupt our formations. Our neural combat systems are programmed to defend against energy weapons, not rocks." Silith's scales darkened. "And this?" She gestured to another section of the battle footage, where human fighters were executing maneuvers that seemed to defy their own tactical databases. "They're learning, Commander. Each time we adapt our strategies, they analyze the results and modify their approach. They're using our own predictability against us." A sudden alert pierced the command center. New contacts appeared on the tactical display, dozens of small human vessels emerging from what appeared to be debris fields. "Impossible," Krell exclaimed. "Our sensors showed those debris clusters were inert." "They've been watching us," Silith realized, her third eye widening. "Learning how our sensors work, what they ignore. They've turned our technological superiority into a weakness." The human vessels struck with devastating efficiency, their weapons seemingly primitive but perfectly suited to exploit gaps in Nexarian defenses. They didn't try to match Nexarian technology, they simply found ways to make it irrelevant. "All ships, break formation," Silith commanded, but it was too late. The humans had anticipated this response, using the chaos to drive Nexarian ships into carefully prepared killing zones. As her fleet began to crumble, Silith received a transmission from one of the human vessels. The commander's face appeared on her screen, wearing what her cultural database identified as a grim smile. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" the human asked. "You thought technology alone wins wars. But we humans learned long ago, it's not the weapons that matter most, it's how you use them." Silith watched in horror as her perfect fleet, with its neural-enhanced crews and superior technology, was systematically dismantled by an enemy that refused to fight according to the rules of proper warfare. "Send word to High Command," she ordered, her scales now a pale shade of defeat. "The humans are not primitive. They are something far more dangerous, they are adaptable. As her flagship systems began to fail, Silith finally understood the true nature of their enemy. The humans hadn't spent their history trying to achieve perfection, they had embraced imperfection, learned from it, evolved through it. And in doing so, they had become something the Nexarians never could: unpredictable. The neural network. Dr. Nadia Petrov stood in the underground laboratory beneath the Siberian tundra, her breath visible in the cold air as she studied the captured Nexarian neural interface. Around her, banks of quantum computers processed terabytes of alien code, trying to unlock the secrets of their enemy's perfect programming. Status update? General Marcus Walsh asked, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic displays surrounding them. The military leader had aged decades in the months since the Nexarian invasion began. "We've cracked it," Nadia replied, her fingers dancing across the haptic interface. Their neural network isn't just a combat system, it's their weakness. The Nexarians sacrificed adaptability for perfection. The laboratory hummed with energy as she pulled up visualization of the alien neural patterns. Beautiful, crystalline structures of code flowed across the screens, each pattern more perfect than the last. But within that perfection, Nadia and her team had found something the Nexarians never expected: predictability. Their neural enhancement is based on perfect execution of pre-programmed responses, she explained. But they can't improvise. They can't think laterally. Every solution must come from their existing protocols. Walsh studied the displays intently. "And you're sure about the countermeasure?" Nadia nodded, bringing up another screen showing human brainwave patterns. "We don't need to match their technology. We just need to introduce enough chaos into their systems to force them outside their protocols." In the testing chamber below, a captured piece of Nexarian technology sat inside a containment field. Nadia initiated the sequence they'd developed. The device's crystalline structure began to pulse with energy, trying to establish its normal perfect patterns. Then she activated their countermeasure. The effect was immediate. The alien technology's patterns became erratic, its perfect sequences disrupted by the seemingly random input from their human-designed interference system. Within moments, it shut down completely. "It's like introducing jazz into a classical orchestra," Nadia explained. "Their systems can't handle improvisation. They've evolved so far toward perfection that they've lost the ability to deal with chaos." Walsh's eyes narrowed. "And you're certain this will work on their neural interfaces?" "We've already tested it," she replied, pulling up footage from recent skirmishes. Those victories in orbit weren't just about tactics. We've been subtly interfering with their neural networks, forcing their warriors to face something they've never encountered: uncertainty. The general moved closer to the displays, watching as Nexarian ships and soldiers struggled to maintain their perfect formations when faced with the human countermeasure. "Their greatest strength has become their greatest weakness," Nadia finished. "Every time they try to adapt, their neural programming forces them back into predictable patterns. They can't break free of their own perfection." An alert sounded from one of the monitoring stations. New data was coming in from the front lines. The Nexarians were attempting to modify their neural interfaces to resist the human interference. "Look at this," Nadia said, excitement creeping into her voice. She highlighted a section of the alien code. "They're trying to perfect their way out of the problem. But every modification they make just gives us more patterns to exploit." Walsh studied the tactical implications. "How soon can we deploy this system-wide?" "That's the beauty of it," Nadia replied. "We don't need complex technology to deliver the countermeasure. Simple electromagnetic pulses, properly modulated, will do it. We can adapt any human transmission system to carry the signal." She brought up a global map showing human communication networks. Every radio tower, every satellite, every cell phone becomes a weapon. We turn their quest for perfection into a prison. The general's face hardened with determination. Initialize the deployment. It's time to show the Nexarians that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our imperfection, Nadia agreed. Our ability to embrace chaos, to learn from failure, to adapt without trying to achieve perfect solutions. As the deployment sequence began, alarms started blaring throughout the facility. The Nexarians had launched a massive counteroffensive, obviously aware that humanity had discovered something dangerous. They're scared, Walsh realized. For the first time since this war began, they're facing something they can't perfect their way out of. Nadia watched as humanity's countermeasure began spreading across the globe, disrupting Nexarian neural networks wherever it encountered them. The aliens' perfect formations began to break down, their coordinated attacks falling into disarray. We never needed to match their perfection, she said softly. We just needed to remind them of what they'd forgotten, that true strength lies in the ability to embrace imperfection and learn from it. Breaking formation. Grand Admiral Zirith of the Nexarian Empire stood aboard the bridge of the Celestial Dominance, his crystalline form radiating waves of deep crimson anxiety. Before him, the holographic battle display showed the largest fleet ever assembled in Nexarian history, 10,000 ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns, their neural networks synchronized to operate as a single unstoppable force. The humans cannot possibly resist such perfection, his second-in-command, Strategos Lyra, declared. Her scales shimmered with confidence as she reviewed the battle plans that had been refined through millions of simulations to achieve absolute tactical precision. But Zirith wasn't so certain. The reports from the front lines haunted him, stories of human unpredictability, of their strange ability to turn apparent weakness into strength. His third eye twitched as he studied the tactical display, searching for any sign of the enemy. Multiple contacts detected, the sensor officer announced. Human vessels approaching in irregular formations. The human fleet emerged from the darkness of space, their ships arranged in patterns that defied traditional combat logic. They moved like a swarm of insects, each vessel seemingly operating independently yet somehow maintaining a cohesive strategy. They dare to face us with such chaos? Lyra scoffed. Execute Battle Plan Omega-9. Show them the power of perfect coordination. The Nexarian fleet moved as one, their ships flowing into attack positions with mathematical precision. Energy weapons charged, shields synchronized, neural networks humming with shared purpose. It was beautiful, terrifying, and absolutely predictable. That's when the humans revealed their true strategy. Signal disruption detected, the communications officer cried out. Our neural networks are experiencing interference. Zirith watched in horror as the humans broadcast their countermeasure, not a weapon of destruction, but one of disruption. The perfect synchronization of the Nexarian fleet began to falter as their neural networks encountered patterns they couldn't process. Impossible, Lyra whispered, her scales paling. They're using our own broadcast frequencies against us. Every attempt to coordinate our forces only spreads their interference further. The human fleet struck then, but not as a coordinated force. Each ship, each squadron operated independently, adapting their tactics moment by moment. There was no pattern to predict, no perfect strategy to counter. They turned the vast battlefield into thousands of small engagements, forcing the Nexarians to fight the kind of chaotic battle they were never designed for. Order the fleet to regroup. Zirith commanded. Fall back to secondary positions. But the damage was done. The Nexarian ships, their crews struggling with disrupted neural networks, couldn't maintain their perfect formations. Some vessels, trying to compensate, fell back on their base programming and executed standard combat maneuvers, making them even more predictable to the humans who had studied those very patterns. Admiral, the tactical officer reported, human vessels are targeting our command and control nodes. They're not trying to destroy our ships, they're isolating them, forcing them to operate independently. Zirith watched as his perfect fleet began to fragment. Ships that had never operated without neural guidance floundered in the chaos. Crews trained to execute flawless protocols now faced situations no simulation had prepared them for. Through it all, the human fleet moved with an almost organic fluidity, each vessel adapting to the changing battlefield. They didn't need perfect coordination because they had never relied on it. Their strength lay in their ability to operate independently while maintaining a common purpose. "They're not just fighting us," Zirith realized, his voice heavy with understanding. "They're teaching us a lesson about the price of perfection." The battle continued to deteriorate. The Nexarian fleet, for the first time in its history, faced an enemy that had turned its greatest strength into a crippling weakness. Ships began to retreat, their crews unable to cope with the freedom of independent action. As the celestial dominance shuddered under human assault, Zirith received a transmission from the enemy commander. The human's face showed no triumph, no gloating, only a solemn understanding. "Your mistake wasn't in seeking perfection," the human said. "It was in forgetting that perfection is a journey, not a destination. Each defeat, each failure, each moment of chaos is a chance to learn and grow. You sacrificed that for the illusion of flawless execution." Zirith watched as his grand fleet, the pinnacle of Nexarian military might, was systematically dismantled by an enemy that had embraced imperfection as a strength. In that moment, he understood that this defeat marked not just the end of a battle, but perhaps the beginning of his species' own journey back toward the power of adaptation. Evolution's children. The Great Hall of the Nexarian High Council had never hosted beings from another species. Its crystalline walls, designed to amplify the telepathic communications of the council members, now reflected the sound of human footsteps as Ambassador Rachel Torres walked confidently toward the center platform. Above her, the assembled council members floated in their traditional meditation spheres, their iridescent forms shifting through colors that betrayed their unease. Supreme Chancellor Varix, his 3 eyes fixed upon the human ambassador, descended to address her directly. 3 cycles have passed since the great battle, Varix began, his translator converting his harmonic speech into human standard. Our fleets are withdrawn. Our neural networks adapted. Yet you come before us not to discuss terms of surrender, but to propose alliance? Rachel smiled, a gesture that still confused many Nexarians. Chancellor, what we propose is something more important than victory or defeat. We propose evolution. She activated a holographic projector, filling the chamber with images from the war. But instead of battles, she showed moments of adaptation, Nexarian ships learning to operate independently, crews developing new tactics without neural guidance, young warriors beginning to question the doctrine of perfect execution. Your civilization achieved something remarkable, Rachel continued. You pushed the boundaries of neural enhancement and technological integration further than any species we've encountered. But in pursuing perfection, you forgot its cost. The council chamber hummed with tension as she brought up new images, ancient Nexarian historical records showing their species before the neural networks, when they too learned through trial and error, through failure and adaptation. We've studied your earliest records, Rachel explained. Your species wasn't always focused on perfection. You were explorers, innovators, risk-takers. The neural networks were meant to enhance these qualities, not replace them. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their meditation spheres. What she spoke was rarely discussed, the time before the doctrine of perfection, when Nexarian society embraced chaos as a path to growth. The war showed us something profound, Rachel continued. When our countermeasures disrupted your neural networks, many of your warriors didn't simply fail. They began to adapt. Beneath the programming, the fundamental nature of your species, the drive to evolve, to overcome challenges through innovation, was still there. She gestured to a young Nexarian warrior standing at the chamber's entrance. Junior Commander Trix stepped forward, his scales showing not the uniform color of neural synchronization, but the natural shifting patterns of independent thought. Tell them what you discovered, Commander, Rachel prompted. Trix raised his head, addressing the council without the formal protocols that had governed such interactions for millennia. When our neural networks failed during the battle, my squadron faced a choice: retreat or adapt. We chose to adapt. And in doing so, we discovered something our programming had hidden from us: the joy of genuine innovation. A murmur ran through the council chamber. Such direct speech, such embrace of imperfection, would have been unthinkable before the war. "We don't come to demand your surrender," Rachel declared. "We come to offer partnership. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our tactics, it's our understanding that perfection isn't a destination. It's a constant journey of growth through challenge, through failure, through adaptation." Supreme Chancellor Varix descended fully from his meditation sphere, his crystalline form shifting to deep blues of contemplation. "You believe our species can return to this path? After so many generations of neural guidance?" Rachel's response was interrupted by a sudden commotion at the chamber's entrance. A group of young Nexarians entered, scientists, warriors, and civilians who had begun experimenting with reduced neural enhancement. Their scales showed a riot of colors and patterns, each unique, each representing independent thought and personal growth. "They already are," Rachel said softly. "Your youth have begun to question the doctrine of perfection. They've seen another way, not to abandon your technological achievements, but to use them as tools for growth rather than limitations." Varric studied the young Nexarians, seeing in their unauthorized presence and individual expression something his species had nearly lost: the courage to challenge established patterns, to risk failure in pursuit of growth. "Perhaps," he said finally, his scales shifting to colors unseen in the council chamber for generations, "it is time for the Nexarian Empire to embark on a new kind of evolution." As the council chamber erupted in discussion, Rachel watched the interaction between the young Nexarians and their elders. The war had cost both species dearly, but it had also given them something invaluable: a reminder that true strength lies not in achieving perfection, but in the eternal journey of growth through challenge, through failure, and through the courage to embrace imperfection as a path to something greater than perfection itself.